Jeffrey Epstein.
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 Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein. Who was he? Where did he start? In this video, we're going to go through a timeline of Jeffrey Epstein and from where he started into where he ultimately ended. We're going to see a better picture of how he got to where he was. Like many of you, I'm sure, I was curious about where Jeffrey started and how he ended up to be the person he was and how he ended up in the position he was. So in this video, I have gone through a lot of research and put everything together into a chronological timeline, and we're going to go through it together. Born on the 20th of January, 1953 in Brooklyn, he was raised in a Jewish gated community called Seagate at a lower middle class neighborhood. His parents had modest jobs. His mom was a school aide and his dad worked for the New York City Parks Department. Jeffrey was the oldest of two boys. Jeffrey excelled in math and was able to skip not only 3rd grade, but 8th grade as well, allowing him to graduate Lafayette High School at the age of 16 in 1969. Classmates said that he was quiet and nerdy. In 1969, he studied physics and math at Cooper Union, then transferred to NYU in 1971, and then left in 1974 without a degree. This is where the research starts to get a little wild. From 1973 to 1975, he taught physics at Dalton School in Manhattan. For those who are unfamiliar with this school, it's a school that prepares children for college. It's a K through 12. Some students made statements later on that he was inappropriate with the girls in class. Not a shocker. The next year, in 1976, Jeffrey was let go of his position at Dalton, but no worries. With the help of a parent from the school he was teaching at, he was able to meet Ace Greenberg, chairman of Bear Stearns, an investment bank that went belly up in 2008, and was able to land a job there. He then became a limited partner, which essentially means that he has a stake in the company, and he also helps with major decisions. This was weirdly quick, by the way. I think it happened within a couple years, which is almost unheard of, especially at his age. And this is all thanks to his quote-unquote quantitative skills. Quantitative skills. Yes, that's what got him to where he was. I'm sure it wasn't blackmailing. Old Jeff went to start his own investment firm in 1981, naming it J. Epstein & Co., later renamed it to Financial Trust Company. Really bad names twice. He created the business to cater to billionaires and the ultra wealthy, which seemed to only be Leslie Wexner. All right, and so later on in our timeline, we get a new character unlock, the famous Ghislaine Maxwell. No one knows exactly when Jeffrey and Ghislaine first got together, but some sources say in the late 1980s to the 1990s. It seems that Robert Maxwell was probably the one who introduced them, which is Ghislaine's father. Others say they met at a party in 1991 after the death of Robert Maxwell. If you'd like a video on the Maxwells and how weird that situation is, please put that in the comment section below. In 1994, Trump takes his first documented trip with Jeffrey Epstein and Clinton's aide Mark Middleton. In 1995, Jeffrey officially moved into his Manhattan mansion that was owned by Leslie Wexner. He let him live there, then sold it to him in 1998 for $20 million. This house is the same one that had the cameras throughout the bathrooms and the bedrooms. The FBI stated amongst the weird aesthetic that was going on inside the house was the entry hallway, which had rows of prosthetic eyeballs. Real weird. He also had a stuffed poodle on the grand piano, and there were also nude pictures of young girls and more incriminating evidence throughout the house. In 1998, Jeffrey would end up buying an island off of the coast of the Virgin Islands called Little St. James. At this time, he was also purchasing property all over the world, including in Manhattan, Palm Beach, Paris, New Mexico. I'm assuming he needed to expand his empire at this point because whatever he was doing in New York was going so well that he was upgrading the business, essentially. Jeffrey also put on the island a new mansion, a few guest houses, and a weird temple-like structure. The temple was built for Jeffrey when he got out of jail in 2008, but It featured weird statues. Some people thought they were owls. I'm pretty sure they're cockatoos, which apparently is like some weird symbol for child essayers. But also there is another connection to cockatoos, which symbolize exotic wealth, trade route connections, and Mary's purity. I thought I'd put that in there just because I thought it was weird. In 2001, Epstein finally purchased his first real plane, a Boeing 727. Even though the logs say that he was on this exact plane 10 years ago, roughly 10 years ago, I think he was just leasing it at that point. There is no records I could find personally of him owning a plane before then. I've heard the pilot talk about him owning another plane, but I couldn't find it. This is the earliest one. I think that they were just leasing the other ones. Okay, I digress. This plane was later nicknamed by the press the Lolita Express. If you are curious on what Lolita means, it is a Spanish word that means sorrow. I was unfamiliar with this, but this was a popular book in 1955, and one of the characters was named Lolita. There was later a movie made about this, but essentially it was about a 12-year-old girl who was essayed. Yeah, anyways, it's really popular and creepy. For monetization reasons, I'm not going to go into this anymore, but you are more than welcome to check it out. Moving on. With all this money coming in, Jeffrey decided that he was going to start doing some philanthropy. He started donating an enormous amount of money to Harvard University to the sums of $8.9 million, giving him the status of visiting fellow. If you're like, what is a visiting fellow? Because I didn't know what that was. It essentially means he's an honorary member of Harvard and he can take place in studies and essentially just be a part of the community. Weirdly enough, in 2008, he was still a part of it, and that's when he was a registered sex offender. So pretty interesting that Harvard let him stay, but that makes sense from all the people that were connected with him. From 1999 to 2002, Epstein was getting daily massages from underage girls at this point. This was reported by the butlers later on in the court cases. From 2000 to 2004, Epstein continued expanding his secretive social circle, hosting underage girls at his Palm Beach and his New York estate, while also operating model agencies in New Mexico, Florida, and New York. Victims later testified that this is when the abuse started for them. In 2005, the police get a complaint from a 14-year-old girl about Jeffrey Epstein, which launches a police investigation. In 2006, it gets kicked up the ladder to the FBI, and now they have a federal investigation. In 2007, the federal investigation turns into an indictment that was prepared. The federal prosecutors gathered enough evidence to charge Jeffrey with multiple serious crimes, including trafficking minors, which gives you a long sentence time usually, until Epstein's legal team later, which included high-profile attorneys Alan Dershowitz, Roy Black, Ken Starr, and Jay Lefkowitz. They began negotiating a plea deal with the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta. Acosta later went on to say that people or others told him that he belonged to intelligence and to just leave him alone. There is no hard evidence of this. Not to mention Jeffrey's legal team was attacking and investigating the individual prosecutors and their families, which Costa later described as an assault that influenced Costa's decision. This resulted in a non-prosecution agreement, or an NPA. It stated that Epstein would plead guilty to minor state charges in exchange for federal prosecution dropping their entire case. Epstein and unnamed associates, including Ghislaine Maxwell, were granted immunity. This is the exact agreement that they are trying to use currently, right now, in 2025, to get Ghislaine Maxwell out of prison, because they're saying that the immunity that she acquired here accounts for the later case that happened. In 2008, Epstein pled guilty to 2 state charges, soliciting prostitution and soliciting a minor. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, served 13 months, mostly under work release program, which means he could just kind of go and do as he pleased as long as it was work, and he still got visitors. The federal indictment in general was just shelved at that point. In 2009, Jeffrey was released and resumed exactly what he was doing before, because He obviously can't be stopped at this point. In 2011 to 2015, civil litigation and public exposure start to take place as Virginia Goffrey and others file a civil suit. Goffrey shares a photo of Prince Andrew in the press, and this kind of picks up a lot of steam, and a lot of people start to get pretty pissed at this. In 2016, Jeffrey expanded his island territory and bought the island right above his, which is Great St. James. So he now owns both of those islands. In 2018, the Miami Herald investigation drops and exposes the shady deal that was made in 2008 with Costa and Epstein and the whole abuse network, and just kind of makes it super public again. In 2019, public pressure is mounted and Alexander Acosta resigns as the U.S. Labor Secretary in 2019. July 4th, 2019. This is when Jeffrey Epstein is arrested for sex trafficking and conspiracy involving minors. And July 19th to July 26th, 2019, he was found injured in his cell, placed on watch. August 8th, 2019, Jeffrey signs and trusts all of his assets to longtime employees. Weird. August 9th, the very next day, 2019, the guards' protocol that's supposed to be every 30 minutes are not followed. The cameras malfunction. August 10th, oh no, a dead body. Oh no, discovered unresponsive in his cell at 6 a.m., was pronounced dead. The New York City Examiner rules that he had taken his own life. Later, Dr. Michael Baden was hired by Jeffrey's brother and had determined that it was a homicide. In 2023, the U.S. Virgin Islands take legal action against J.P. Morgan Chase for the involvement with Epstein. They ended up settling for $75 million. Now, I don't know what they had, but I'd love to know that. So this is just a taste of what happened in Jeffrey's life and like where he started and where he ended up. And it's so crazy that he started from a middle class guy and ended up being a high class monster surrounded by the most powerful people in the world. It's no wonder why we will never see the Jeffrey Epstein files for real. Like, we're not going to see them. It would take an act of God for us to see them. Very unlikely we're going to see that. Do I think Ghislaine Maxwell will be getting out? Probably. I do think Trump's going to pardon her. At this point, it seems very likely that that's what's going to happen. Also, I would really love to go into Jeffrey Epstein's connection with Mossad, and that looks very promising. I am a high believer leaning towards Mossad at this point, just from all of the things I've seen and even the flight logs that I got to go through. It just seems like that's a high possibility, especially who he was hanging out with. It makes a lot of sense. If you want me to do a deep dive on that and make a video on it, I will absolutely do that. I also wanted to add, as I was doing research for this, especially going through the flight logs, I would look up people that were on the flight log, and it was crazy. It was like a 50-50 that they were probably dead and they died by suicide. So that's pretty crazy. Something to think about. I mean, we kind of all know, but this was a weird experience to kind of go through all this and like track him. It was, I don't know, feels weird.